So like, again, this wasn't something that someone like was teaching me how to do. It was literally me just trial by fire. People have creative aspirations, but they don't do shit on the weekends. I just saw no one else was doing it, and I would love to see that. So I might as well just be the person to start doing that.
Hey everyone, how's it going? On this episode of the KDigitals podcast, I am joined by the legend Spencer Pries. How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing well. It's really cold in Calgary, and I was mentioning to Chris before we were jumping on, my face was defrosting. So no, I'm really I'm doing well. I got my bev here, and I'm really excited to be chatting with you.
What are you drinking today? Am I allowed to do like a bev check? Is that like shameless? Is that rude?
Yeah, it's highly encouraged. I'm drinking, it's a brand called Loop. They're out of, I think they're out of Quebec, if I'm remember correctly. They do everything from like juices to sparkling water. So I got it's like strawberry and northern plant is what it's called. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
But it's tasty. It's not like super sweet or anything. So
you have like a go-to like, what first one I thought you were doing bev check. I thought like you were drinking like beer or something on the podcast. But like you go from that to sparkling water. You never know, right? Do you have like your
go-to?
I
think I have like go-tos in each like realm of the bev universe, if you want to call it that. I do think some people come through like, when they think of a bev check, they think of like, you know, a beer or like a Pilsner or something like that. But like bevs for me are anything from that to like just regular old tap water. So I think, I don't know. Like AHA is my favorite sparkling water. Like I buy flats of it whenever I see it in stores because it's not as popular as like something like bubbly or whatever. I personally don't fuck with bubbly, so sorry for any listeners who are like turning the podcast off because of they're bubbly fans. But yeah, AHA's a go-to for me. I'm a big dirty chai coffee drinker. Okay. So normally I'll do my coffee black, but a dirty chai is like a chai latte but with espresso in it. So that is like good hot or cold. I was gonna make that, but we were already behind the podcast, so I just grabbed an easy old can.
Yeah. So are you like a real like someone that's like pure, you know, your coffee in and out, you're against Starbucks to the very, very end, like one of those very aficionados? Yeah,
I definitely like, I remember I had this guy Lumpy from a band called Sanction on the podcast, and he's an avid coffee drinker. And like, I think overall, I don't fuck with like corporate coffee, if you want to call it that. But like, gun to my head, if me and my wife were on a road trip and the only thing we could drink was dirty old Tim Hortons, then I'm gonna drink Tim Hortons, right?
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, I don't know. I personally am a big I like supporting local coffee shops here in Calgary. And I think coffee overall has become this thing where when you go traveling, you like want to go to the coffee shops there and see what their roasteries are like and, you know, the different spaces like that. So it's definitely been this booming of a culture. I wouldn't say I'm as nerdy as most people as far as like trying to weigh my beans. It's like I have a pour over and that's a system that works for me. And I would say over the years, I've definitely made a lot more coffee than going out and treating myself, so to speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever had like Vietnamese coffee?
Vietnamese coffee is super good. I've normally only had it when it's like we're going out and getting like that kind of food. It's like, oh yeah, they have that. And I'll like pick up one of those, but it's never like I'm going out of my way just to get Vietnamese coffee, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, like it was the same thing. I was a black coffee drinker for a while, and then there's a point where I think I just tried doing coffee creamer one time. I was like, oh, no, that's too much. And all of a sudden, just every coffee was coffee creamer, and I was like, that's too much for me. Back to black coffee, and then now I'm like Vietnamese coffee like every day, all day, and just like the tolerance just goes higher. I'm like, this is not good. I'm gonna keep drinking this for fun. No.
Yeah, when I start, like, I don't know, like, where are you based again? I don't know if I even asked you that.
No
'Cause
worries.
I'm pulling all these Canadian like businesses. I'm like, oh, I don't know if your listenership is more American. And they're like, I don't know what the fuck like Tim Hortons is or anything like that.
Oh yeah, no worries. So I'm based. Well, I just moved to San Diego. I was living in San Jose for a while, which is how I kind of discovered you, because like I was interviewing other bands from the San Jose area, and I found you through them, and then moved to San Diego. But
got you.
Yeah.
So like Tim Hortons is like the equivalent. And I don't want to get like shit for this, but it's pretty much the equivalent of like Dunkin' Donuts. But talking to some people, you know, from the States, it seems like Dunkin' is actually on another level. Tim Hortons is like not McDonald's as far as like fast food cafe, but it's, you know, for coffee and pastries, it's within that tier. But yeah, I don't like. Yeah, for me, it's always, it started, they have this thing called an ice cap, which is essentially just sugar, water, and coffee creamer, kind of how you were saying.
Okay.
And that's one of the very first introductions to like coffee I had when I was like 14, 15. And then over time, there's this thing, it's like a Canadian known thing. It's like you go to Tim Hortons, you can get a double, which is 2 creamer, 2 sugar. Okay. But then you get like the psychos who do like, the triple or 4x4. Oh. And by that time it's like paper printer white.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like over time I weaned off sugar. I think I like did milk for a bit, and then I was just like 1 sugar. And then my grandpa, for as long as I'd known him, was always drinking his coffee black. And I don't know, for me, that was just a weird goal of mine, like looking up to him. I'm like, you know, Grandpa, I'm drinking coffee. And then he's like, oh, well, got all this stuff in it. So over time, I was like, you know, I want to get to drinking my coffee black. And now it's like, you know, I'm never going to go back to that. But who knows? Who knows?
For sure. Cool, man. That I try to introduce people right away. And I feel like I totally ran down that. Like, tell me more about the Bev check. Interesting.
I know. It's so funny. Like I have people on my podcast, and like I've introduced this section. I'm sure you've listened to a few of them where I check a bev and they check a bev, and then we start talking about either sparkling water or coffee or beer or alcohol for like a good 5 or 10 minutes. So it's almost like a nice icebreaker in a way to like get someone to feel comfortable before we get into like talking about their band or their creative work.
For sure. Well, to reel it back, right? Like when I try to introduce the podcast, so the whole point of the podcast, Spencer, is I like to dive into artists on their process, their origin, their hustle, right? Sure. But in your case, you're multi-talented, right? You're a guitarist, you run this podcast, you're also kind of a videographer in a way. When I guess you introduce yourself, like what's your first thing you would want to label yourself as, right? What do you define yourself as a creative?
Yeah, I think that has become a lot harder as I guess the things that I'm surrounded by have grown and blossomed. But I've always defaulted to like a content creator as far as like whether I'm doing podcasts or playlists or filming live sets. So I think on that side of things, it's like that covers most bases, but you know, playing in bands and writing music, it's like, that's, you know, a musician, but even in that realm, I'm still like the guy in the band to think about like, okay, how do we market this release? How do we, we have this many songs. How many videos could we do? When should we release those? Do we do everything at once? Do we stagger it? So my brain has always been in the world of marketing and just like planning things and just disrupting kind of the overall, environment of a lot of things, because I think disruption really is a great way to break through the noise of a lot of, especially with the internet, there's just so much oversaturation. And I think lots of people, like, everyone wants to do something creative nowadays. And I think that's a very human thing, but a lot of people don't think about taking risks to take actual leaps forward in their creative work. So
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, if I, going back to the original thing that you said, like, I would say I'm a content creator, largely around music, but also a musician as well. So
yeah. So I want to totally pick at that, because that's I think a lot of good like value and gold, right, to think of it. So do you have like, what is your background? Do you have like a marketing background? Do you have a business background where you just think creatively and you just think really intensely about it in that kind of perspective?
Yeah, so this is, I'm glad that I get to finally talk about this on a podcast. But growing up, I always kind of, was into things like, video games, and I was really obsessed with like websites like Newgrounds that had all like the animation videos and stuff.
Yeah.
So I watched a lot of I forget what the program is called, but there was like lots of like stick figure animation. Some people went super crazy. Some were just like really, really basic. And so I was doing that for a long time. I watched this thing. I don't know if it was on Newgrounds or how I even found out about it, but it's this thing called Nox's Corner. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. Probably not. So it's like this channel, and this guy would make these claymations, but the characters were just like blue silhouettes of people, essentially. Okay. And so he would make these claymations similar to Wallace, like take Wallace and Gromit, but like dumb it right down to like the bare essentials.
Yeah.
So it would be like the story of one video would be two clay guys are hanging out. One guy enters and he has a cup of water and would spill the cup of water and then be like, oh no, I'm going to drown. And he would like fall face first in the cup of water and drown. And they're like, how about you just walk around the puddle? And then like another clay guy comes in and he's like, I'll rescue you. And he like throws the rope and then he's dead. And then it would just be this unbelievably stupid premise. But I was just obsessed with the process of like making an interesting and entertaining piece of content. And so I started essentially replicating that on my like dresser in my like room growing up. And I had this like webcam where I would like take a picture, move the hand. So like, I feel like that was such an early thing for me to understand the hard work aspect of making content, especially, because nowadays it's like people just get a vlogging camera and that's like something that they're trying to jump to, like, oh, film it really quick. But with that, it was like, no one was teaching me how to do that. So I had to really like learn the hard way of like, I can't skip an arm motion if I want it to look super smooth.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So that was really foundational. I also, like what I was saying about the video games, I played a lot of Halo growing up, very big into Halo 2. And then I got introduced to machinima, which is essentially video making with video games. So I watched a lot of like Red versus Blue growing up.
Yep.
Yeah, just religiously every day at home, just watching it on their website. So I started replicating that, and it would literally be like meeting people in Xbox Live Big Team Battle and being like, hey, like you sound like a normal person. I'm trying to make this war movie. Will you be my friend? And I was like 12, 13 years old. Like, yeah. Like, I'm sure a lot of people were like, I have no idea. But for some reason, I convinced all these kids, I had like a friends list, and I had all these people to like plan shoots with and be like, okay, you're the sergeant, so you wear this emblem, and you're the alien with the energy sword. And I can't tell you how many times like we'd be like set up the perfect shot of like the base, and then someone would be the dickhead and have the secret rocket launcher and kill everybody, and then I would have to boot them and then almost like refigure out how to shoot the scene without them. So like, again, this wasn't something that someone like was teaching me how to do. It was literally me just trial by fire. Like, I'm just kind of finding these things out on my own. So I think a lot of those early stages over time just got my foundations in, again, content creation. But then, over time, when I started working and wanting to have a career, I started, working in a marketing department as a videographer, very, very niche projects. But then overall, over time that just like turned into like bigger things. Like I worked for a trucking company in their marketing department. So I did like the very basic, like a safety video for the safety department, but then also turned into like traveling to Ontario or Calgary before I lived here, and like planning shoots with, semi trucks going down through the mountains or going through the 401 in Ontario. So like that, I don't know, it was very gradual. Like I went to school through my job for like some creative stuff, but it was a lot of it was just like confirming what I've already like learned through other people or just taught myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think like that's the thing. Like when you're like, it's funny. Like you're saying, like you could do a vlog. That's still content, right? But like when you have to actually like problem solve on your own for fun, right? And no one's pushing you to do it. You just by naturally doing, you just pick up on a lot of things. And then a lot of it's not even like watching a YouTube video on how to do this one thing. It's like there's so many little details, like how to do the tripod right, when it falls over, when it breaks, how do I make a tripod out of books, and then make sure like the lighting from the window, like all that little stuff comes together. And it's like, no, that's a semester's worth of knowledge that you learn in like a weekend, right?
Right. And yeah, I think a lot of people, especially with the highly authentic nature that is social media, a lot of people don't want to be seen that they're figuring things out. They want to have things fine-tuned before they're, posting their first podcast or posting their first YouTube video or album review, whatever it is. And for me, I've always been like, I think that there was naturally like maybe a period of that, but then over time I've been like, so my process is more like put it out there, get feedback, and then adjust. And that's like a lot of people think backwards. They think like, if I had a nickel for every time I heard a YouTuber, podcaster, any kind of like quote unquote influencer say, have a little bit of traction and say like, I'd love to know what you guys want to see from me, like, post in the comments. And like, I've definitely like, sent, ask specific things, but not like a directional question of like, where should I go? Like no one told me, hey, Scope, you should do a podcast. I was just like, I think that this is let's try it. And if no one listens to the first 10 episodes, maybe we'll stop. But that clearly wasn't the case because we're 100 episodes deep now. So yeah, I think my process has always been like, do as much as you can and, don't be afraid to like put out a stinker, if that makes sense. Because if you just keep trying, eventually something is going to be the thing. And then that kind of takes your creative endeavors to the next level.
By the way, congrats on 100 episodes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Like I joke with my fiance, like I started trying to do my podcast like before COVID started, but then when COVID started, everyone has a podcast now. And I'm telling you, like, everyone has a podcast now, but give it, a year and a half, and they're all going to just die out because it takes consistency, right? But you're already at the 100, like you're way past like everyone. What's keeping you going in that?
Well, yeah, just on that point, I think a lot of people, I think there's two things where it's like, it's getting over that mental barrier of like starting something and just knowing all the back ends of like, okay, I make a podcast, like how the hell do I get it on Spotify? How do I get it on Apple Music? How do we do a video version of that podcast? So a lot of those things, it kind of separates, for lack of a better term, it separates the boys from the men as far as like who's actually wanting to do that, like actually, and they'll do the research and they'll, work on the weekends that everyone else is, like no one's partying right now, but in like a normal world, like people will be like, I don't want to work on the weekend. I had a long week at work. Like that's a big thing for me is that like a lot of people have creative aspirations, but they don't do shit on the weekends. So like,
interesting. That's a good, that's a good way to frame it. Yeah.
And that's in a very general, like Monday to Friday, like, 9 to 5 world. And I know I've learned that like, even though that is such a normalized thing, it's like so many people work nights, work, 3 to 11 or whatever it is, or, have part-time jobs. So I think just finding spaces, again, to do stuff. And then, because in my opinion, doing gives you actual results. Mm-hmm. Like going to school, like depending on what you're going to school for, it's like, it's someone telling you to do stuff, but 9 times out of 10, you're like maybe working on a project or an assignment that's like a hypothetical or theoretical thing. There's no like ramifications of like, you post a podcast and like some of the audio gets claimed and how do you navigate that? Like, I don't think any professor or teacher is like putting students in that kind of environment. Mm-hmm. So I think it's an aspect of like starting, but I think it's also like, there is that point, like you said, like hitting a certain like episode mark is, I remember back when we were like 28 episodes in, and it was like there wasn't a doubt in me, but it was one of those things where you're like you're just getting up the mountain and you're looking up at like, the Joe Rogans and podcasts that have hundreds of episodes, and you're like how am I gonna get up there? And then then you hit 50 and you're like, oh, okay, like there's some traction here. And then like over time, and now it's like not even something that I question, like it is just a part of my, it's a part of my life now where I'm like, a new band gets signed and I'm like, like it's a band that I genuinely like and enjoy, and I reach out to them like, hey, I would like to do something with you. And even if it's something where it's not even a band, it's like, I think this person has a lot of cool stories or good perspectives. And it's almost like even mentally, like not like almost accepting that it's not going to be the #1 episode that I do forever. It's like, there's been plenty of those where I'm like, I'm interviewing this person purely for myself. Yeah. Because, I interviewed, his name is Max Moore. He's a very, very big and professional director in Louisville. And he did all like the Code Orange music videos for their new album. So like someone that I genuinely like look up to as a videographer, the actual episode didn't like pop off, but then, it's like something that I've learned is kind of, if you're making content and you're not really sure, like, I don't know if the stuff that I am like super, super passionate about is like popping versus like something that I know would do well and it's like more informative, like playing around with that and saying like doing one for you and then one for them versus like all for you or all for them, So it's kind of like balancing the scales, at least at the beginning, to be like, hey, I'm going to like experiment and try things, because then that builds on your reputation as far as like, I'm tuning into this podcast because Spencer or Chris is putting me on to cool individuals in whatever market, but then also being like, who are people searching for? And we're just using the podcast example, but that's where my mind goes. But yeah, what keeps it going is just like, maybe just stubbornness. Just like,
for sure.
I don't know. I think that there's a lot of things where, like you said, there's people, everyone is doing like a lot of new podcasts have started since COVID, but I think it will be when things go back and people can go on a 2-week vacation to Europe, or people can maybe just have more of a social life where it's like, oh, I did have that podcast, but like I do think that a lot of things will just get dropped. Like, all right, that was fun, and that's cool too. I think it's I think everyone's got different aspirations, and if they just wanted to do a podcast about like mountain bikes and interview their mountain bike buddies, and then they do 35 episodes and then call it quits, that's still something that exists on the internet that you can listen to front to back if you're a huge mountain bike fan. So
yeah, I think you hit it on the head. Like, it's a thing where like, even if they started in COVID because like they need something to do, like that's also fine, right? But like,
definitely,
they get 2-4 episodes in, well, now they know how to use Adobe Premiere, and that's a job skill, that's a resume, put on LinkedIn, and bam, you're now a bit like, And I think that's cool. It's like if you start those little projects, that will snowball, and not like immediately maybe, but like there's something there that there's a seed that's been planted, you know?
Yeah.
So, well, speaking of which, so what made you start the podcast in the first place?
Yeah, I think it was just maybe my overall growth, my overall interest in podcasts, like into like 2018, 2019, and not really seeing a lot of, there's definitely, now that I've gone as deep as I have into it, I'm like, oh yeah, like there's been this hardcore podcast for X number of years, this podcast started during COVID, whatever it is. But at least not from a, going back to like being a content creator. I guess maybe another aspect that I look at is like being an archivist. So like archiving live sets of bands, catching the different things. So, that is just one of many different perspectives in heavy music or just music in general, where, a lot of people either like they just think of it as like a nice thing versus an essential thing. So I wanted to, like not only talk about that, but like, there have definitely been certain episodes where I've talked about certain like moments with bands, as far as like, we had this hype show filmed by X person with X audience, and that changed the trajectory of the band. I've also interviewed a lot of like other photographers and, videographers that kind of do what I do. So it's like, those are the nerdy episodes where we'll like dive deep into like, what gear do you use? But, it's also interesting to hear like, just like different perspective, or just like their stories of, someone in the scene unfortunately passes away, and, the sets and photos and like live recordings can be given to the family, and, like people who have been sitting on tapes or like footage of that person can re-upload it, and it like kind of celebrates their life and makes it go a little bit longer as well. So I think overall I just saw, and maybe this is similar to how I started filming shows as well, is like I just saw a gap. I just saw no one else was doing it, and I would love to see that. So I might as well just be the person to start doing that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I remember I just watched the Sunny episode, number 100 or 199.
Yeah.
But that's another question I want to ask you. But, and you were talking about like, you asked him the same thing, like what do you see yourself as? Like, I don't know. I just always thought it was cool to watch old Rage Against the Machine videos and stuff. It's like, no one's doing that, so I want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why, so obviously 100 episodes, but why start on 0 and end on 99 versus 100?
I think it was like thinking about any sitcom that I would watch, like How I Met Your Mother or Friends, and they have like a pilot episode, which is like episode 0. And I see a lot of people like when they start something, they're like episode 1. But for me, there was just something cool about like, no, this is episode 0. Like it's in such like a dystopian, like we don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. And it really was like me and Cole, who's a photographer on the Scope team. We were just recording in his living room, like no professional lights. We had a very DIY rig. And, like I went up to go to the bathroom, and then Jordan, who was running the cameras, like took over for a bit. So it was like, I look back on that, and when I think of like 100 episodes, I think of it's from episode 1 to 100, which is that 90? Is that 100? I don't know. That's what I think about. But like the episode 0 is like showing again that like the process of like the growth of the show versus like trying to have things so fine-tuned at the beginning to be like, this is what it is forever, like like the show, like on episode 100 we talk a lot about how the show has developed from like doing interviews in like the back of like a band's trailer to like doing them at like a space, and then doing it over Zoom, and like there was even a point when COVID hit where I was like, well, I can't interview people in person, but there's clearly something here. So I had to get over the mental barrier of like, I can't do things in person, but that has opened up so much growth, but also just opportunity to like reach out to bands in California or Florida or Europe, or I interviewed someone from Singapore. And if I was just like, I feel like, you know, now that I'm saying this out loud, I feel like if I decided to, I'm just gonna hit pause, or we're gonna try and do things in person with COVID or whatever, and not at least try to do things over Zoom, it's almost like a selfish decision, at least in my mind, because I think like the whole goal of the show is to like put people onto new bands, have conversations, especially like as soon as COVID hit, it was like people in that music scene need content, like whether it's live shows or just something to like get them through this weird time that we're all still in, obviously. So it's almost like a guilt thing of like, I want people not to give up on live music, heavy music, hardcore, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to put in the hours to like bring on the people that they can at least like, I can't go to shows and haven't gone to shows for over a year, but at least I can tune in Tuesday to Friday to listen to Spencer talk to someone in that scene and you know, just fan the flame a little bit, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, like it's still like an industry, right? And there's more to the industry than just that. But when you bring all it together, it's like really is its own little like ecosystem, right? And like it's necessary because obviously there's live stuff, but like same thing. There's so many just like I interviewed Alex Lee, he's a guitarist, and Holy Grail, he's his own thing now. And it's kind of what started the podcast. Like there are a lot of people I like, but there's like never any interviews with like anyone out there. And it's like, I would love to learn more about like the guy's influences and how he got into this, or how this band started, or how the podcast started. Like those are cool to me, but you're not going to ever find those because they're not big enough, SEO friendly. They're not going to be recorded by the big people. Right.
Yeah. And I talked about it on the 100 episode too, where there is naturally going to be people that maybe are more, they're better spoken for things like a long form podcast like this. But I do think it is cool to like, you see a band like Knock Loose, obviously the singer and maybe, you know, if you know a little bit about the band, it would be like, yeah, Brian and Isaac are probably going to be the ones doing a full on interview that's maybe they're like representing the band. But Pack's son, their drummer, was the first member of that band that I had on the podcast because he has a candle company side hustle that he started during COVID. So I was like, we talked about the band for like 20 minutes, and then I was like, okay, like tell me how you make sense and like and all this like wacky stuff on like that side of things. So I would say 90% of the time, most people are stoked about the other topics that we hit with my guests versus like, you know, only talking of like, there's so many cliche interview questions that I find like, so like, who's your favorite band growing up? Like there's definitely certain things that you can ask that at least set the stage, but like, so like, what are you guys working on right now? Like, it doesn't feel as like, I don't know, like, where's the substance, I guess? Like, some people might go to an interview. I totally get some people might go to an interview too. Like, I want to know what this band is doing because like I'm a huge fanboy. Like I got plenty of those in my life. But sometimes if it's just like the conversation can kind of hit on whatever, there's almost like more, like you can almost like a band more unexpectedly because they talked about another interest that you have, or just like, man, I didn't know so-and-so was like so political and they're like, cause they're not in their music, but like the fact that they covered these topics. So there's so many things at play there. And podcasting to me is like, just kind of like the serendipity of discovering those things.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's a good segue then. So let's hard left it.
Sure.
So if you look at your background, right, you have, the orange skateboard, the orange GameCube controller, the orange poster, and then, but not even just that, right? The walls, the floor, the doors white. You have the black amp and everything. Also, your Instagram is very orange, white, and black. So
Yes.
what's the story behind like that color pattern?
Yeah, I think that's something a little bit more recent in my life. I'm 28 now.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, it's not like I've always gravitated towards orange, but I think in my 20s, when someone's like, what's, like a lot of people in their lives will always get the question, like, what's your favorite color?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, and for some reason I didn't like that because I never felt like I had a good answer, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But then I think over time I was like, I think orange is my color. And to me, it's like, and maybe this developed more as I was like getting into creative work, because then you learn like certain colors in like a print ad are going to invoke different emotions. Like you look at any like going out of business sale flyer and it's all red. It's like buy.
Yeah.
And then you look at something like, most social media platforms nowadays come with blue because it's supposed to be more like social and calming, even though, a lot of those places are nightmares once you actually get into it.
Corporate.
Yeah. Before I get too off topic about that,
yeah.
I think in just the last couple of years, I was just like, okay, I'm not going to like become a living meme and just be the orange guy, but like, I kind of have like, my brain just goes to like, if I am going to have if I'm going to have a jacket for this winter, like, and if I can have it in orange or at least have an aspect of it in orange, that's where my mind goes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe it was a balance of like having the years, like when I was getting into like the Rise Core, like that kind of shit. And it was like all black, like no, like I was like, I don't want to have any color in my life. And now there's like, most of my closet is still like darker colors, but having a pop of orange is almost the thing. This is also really random, but like this hard drive, which is like my Lacy 2 terabyte. That was like, I bought that for the very first festival I filmed. And I was like very new. I was like, I didn't really know much about like editing off of a hard drive. So I was like, I read online that they were good. And yeah, it's been like the best thing. And I think maybe just having that for so many years influenced me to have, like this print. Is shout out to Tyler from You're the Knife. He's like an artist on top of being a badass vocalist. But he drew this for me and it says, "Orange, you happy now?" He like posted it. I immediately was like, I need to buy that. So I don't know. I think to me, the color orange is like that intensity that maybe red has, but it's like more fun and creative.
Like yellow has, yeah.
Yeah, but like, yellow invokes like, I don't know, more like either spring or piss.
Oh, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, but I think overall people think of orange as like, oh, it's like Halloween or construction. I was like, well, you look at a majority of like, not startup companies, but they have at least an accent color that's like in the range of orange, whether it's like a mango-y kind of orange or if it's like very saturated, so I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, I know that I love orange, but I can't, I don't really, it's where my eye goes, but I don't really have a proper, like, oh, it was this moment that I was orangified or changed forever,
Yeah, it's not like
I look at your screen and I see the little orange thing on your chair and I'm like, oh yeah.
Oh yeah, that's just like that. It's an Overwatch chair, so it's just like.
Oh yeah, Overwatch is that drives my eye immediately. So that's funny.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's cool. I was thinking about like, this guy, because even like the photography side, right? We could talk about that too. It's like I started to notice them, like, oh, he has like because I'm trying to get better like my Instagram, right? And a lot of people talk to like, oh, be consistent, find the color scheme. It's like I don't want to do that. But then I see he's like, oh, but he's actually doing it like the right way.
For the longest time I like didn't do that, and it's again, maybe it's just a stubborn thing where it's like I personally like it, but like my wife is like you need to tone it down because it makes your skin look like so crazy, and I need to fine tune my presets. That's another thing is like I have such a big video background, but like my photography, I don't have this like drive to like learn all the like balancing color values and all that kind of shit. It's so like I kind of just want to have one thing, or even just buy someone else's presets that I like and then just use that. It's like I take a photo, preset, boom, Instagram this.
For sure. So I guess, are you like a very like technical person? Like when you have like a camera, like you're like, oh, look what lens you're using, what memory cards are you using? Like, do you get like that into it? Or is it more like, I have the camera, I know to click the button, I know ISO, and I'm done?
Yeah, like I think that you need, like it would be stupid to say like, oh, it doesn't like just click the button, right? But I think you do need to have some like technical proficiency of like, okay, I'm shooting with this type of lens so I can get these kind of shots, and like, you know, depending on, you know, yeah, because then you run into those issues where you're like, why is my footage so shaky? And then you're like, oh, it's because I recorded in a weird frame rate and I didn't line those things up. I think you need to have some kind of technical like know-how. I have gone through the gauntlet, I think, with music and camera gear, where it's like, I think a lot of people have these like weird ideal scenarios where it's like, I buy the DSLR and then I buy the Sony and then I buy the Red, and I'm like, okay, well, what are you shooting? And they're like, oh, you know, like, you know, I'm just doing, you know, some videos of my cat or something. And I'm like any iPhone is like shooting great video for cat content or whatever you've got going on, right? Like, even like, and to each their own. Like, I think, you know, people that find joy off of like getting a 12K render off of like a music video is like really sick. For me, I'm like, someone is gonna watch this on their phone or on YouTube, and it's gonna get crushed with compression. So I'm okay to shoot this in 1080. I'm okay to, you know, like, I find that like some of the technical things can be the barriers again for people to not do shit. And for me, it's like, there is no excuse for people like to not start recording videos, because everyone has one of these. Well, I would say 99% of people have one of these. You can do that on their phone. They can edit on their phone. They can take photos on their phone. You can record podcasts on your phone. Like, you can literally like open a voice memo, record a conversation, edit that together. But people have this idea where it's like, well, once I buy this camera, then I can do this. And it's like, well, like, for, you know, going back to the podcast, for the longest time when I was starting, I was like, oh, like, you know, I got to get a podcast mic. Like, you got a fancy podcast mic that you got, you know, in your hand. And for me, it was like, there was, again, that thought of like, well, like, I got to spend this much money. And what if it breaks when I'm doing running gun style? And I literally, for 100 episodes, recorded with a freaking Shure SM58. And I like held this, and it pissed off some people because it was like, you know, you can see I talk a lot with my hands. So it's like, I'm very much looking forward.
I'm like trying, but then I'll move it and like, oh.
Right. Yeah. But, you know, it's almost like, maybe this is just because I'm a weirdo, but it's like, almost like I feel like I will reward myself for doing a certain level of work. So it's like, when I hit 100 episodes, I was like, okay, I can buy a fancy podcast mic, which I did just a few days ago. And I'll use that for like season 2 of the podcast, versus like, oh, I need to like have a space, have lighting, have, you know, this many followers before I release this episode. Like, I think there's anybody who's done anything successful in their life has put in ungodly amounts of hours of work, whether in the forefront or like behind the scenes. And that's how I look at it, where like, you know, a lot of people start a podcast and then 6 months later they'll launch a Patreon. And I'm like, do you have the most popular podcast where you're getting all these Patreon supporters out of nowhere? Because in my mind, I'm like, I'm 28. I started Scoped in 2017. Is that right? Yeah. And I'm like, when I turn 30, so that's 2 years from like pretty much, yeah, because my birthday was last month. I'm looking at like on my 30th birthday, that's what I'm working towards for like, call it a Patreon ask. But like, I'm not going to cheat. I'm not going to be like, oh, well, it would be really nice now if I had like $200 a month coming in off of that. I'm like, nope, I'm just going to set it. And then it's in my brain to like, just hustle and grind and like build this, you know, music content Death Star that we're working on right now. So that when that comes, like there's almost going to be more people that will feel indebted to me to like support in that way versus, you know, oh, Spencer, like, I don't know who this guy is. He has like 20 podcast episodes and now he's asking for $2 a month or whatever. So I think it's, you know, for someone that I look up to, they always said like the person who can breathe the last wins. So pretty much what that means is like people who are like making content, people are eager to do the ask, like buy my shit, buy my course, like support me. And a lot of people who do really well and grow really meaningful social media, fill in the blank, are people that put in 5 years of like free ongoing content, 10 years of free ongoing content, like bring value to people ultimately. And so if it's just you like recording a wrestling podcast every 3 weeks and, you know, the conversation isn't fruitful and people aren't really getting a lot of it, and then you're asking for compensation, you're kind of like doing things very disgenuinely. Disgenuinely, is that a word? You know it.
Yeah,
you get what I mean.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah,
no, I feel like, I mean, it's the same thing, like I have this now, right? And like this is one of those like spoiled gifts because it could be better, but it was one of the things like you watch like the first 2 podcasts, like it literally is like I recorded it with my phone and like you hear it's like garbage, right? But like it's the content's there, but it's not the best quality. And then I tried to record screen recording and it would crash my computer.
Right.
So, okay, well, I'll record the screen with my DSLR and then put the mic on the laptop, but then you hear the fan and it's just like, God damn.
Yeah.
Then I realize like I have this now, but the first 10, 15 episodes are like that kind of setup. And like, oh, I didn't need this to do that. This just elevated it. But like like I said, you put this down and like have someone just hold it for you and like you can make money, you know, like it's that simple at the end of the day. It's just quality. And like that's, if I use this and don't use this, probably like no one's going to care. Right. It's just audio.
Because a huge thing that I learned too with anything that I did was like quality is subjective. People think that if they have a big camera crew and they're doing this multi-camera podcast and it's with this guest, that it's like before you even hit the record, it's like this is going to be the best piece of content ever. But the fact of the matter is like some people don't care if it's recorded on a phone or on that microphone or on this microphone or in like a professional studio or the mix is done this way. A lot of people, like I've listened to like god awful like audio recordings of like, you know, of certain like audio projects that someone's like, you know, the audio is really shitty, but like just listen to the content. And it's like, yeah, like you're totally right. Like the actual words that are being said are like super engaging and enriching to people's lives. And yeah, maybe the whatever project fill in the blank would do better if there was quality, but a lot of people, it's up to the people, right? Like you put it out into the market and then they'll do stuff. Like there's people with crazy setups and people will still find something to shit on the episode about, right?
Yeah.
So I think I always like seeing the growth of whatever creative endeavor someone is doing. When I was growing up, I would watch drum covers of his name is Luke Holland, and then like because he was the only guy doing like drum covers of like the metalcore stuff that I was like first listening to, and it was very technical. He would do lots of like stick tricks and like kind of stuff like that. And then over time, he joined up with like a pretty big band at the time, and I got to see him kind of do that. And then he left that, and he's done like a number of different like little solo projects and side things with this artist. And I think about it sometimes like, holy shit, I've been following Luke for like over 10 years. And to me, it's never been like, oh, like his content, you know, at the beginning was so shitty. It was just like, at the time, that's what I was looking for. And he was providing that to me, and I engaged with it. Mm-hmm. And then there's almost like this, I've never chatted with the dude ever in my life, but there's this like internet relationship where I get to be a spectator to what he's doing. Yeah. And he just, you know, he'll show up in my, it's not like I even listen or watch a lot of his content now. But that's just an example where at the beginning it was crucial, and then he just again provided value over time, and then I just there's been no reason to unfollow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it was never about the quality of the content. It was just like the content at the end of the day is there.
Yeah,
and it's just how it's been documented.
Yeah, I think, you know, I don't think that he would even come up as a story if it was like, you know, like he was doing drum covers for a year and then was asking for money, and then they're like, oh, fuck this guy, and I'm gonna go watch all these other drummers, right? So I think it's a matter of just like knowing what you want to build creatively, and if that is, you know, you want that to be your full-time thing, like prepare to do like the better part, like a huge part of your, especially your 20s, if you're in that time frame, like of doing that. But yeah, like things take time. Like you know, we had 100 episodes, but there's still like, I still see the climb as far as like getting, you know, a listenership that isn't maybe based off of like, we had a crazy guest on. Like I want to grow it in a way where people are just tuning in because they see it as a reliable podcast, not like we brought on this cool guest. Like I want to be able to do a show with no guest, but still get the same engagement. So yeah. But again, I wouldn't know that if I didn't do 100 episodes. Yeah. And I think, and that's like such a good point. Cause like the two examples are like, man, I can take that conversation so many ways, right? But it's like, we'll talk Rooster Teeth, right? To bring it back to Rivers, but like, when you look at them, like, and they would talk about on their podcast, which is kind of a precursor inspiration to this podcast. Their episodes, like they would say like, yeah, we're like one of the biggest like internet companies now, but like PewDiePie puts out a video of him doing whatever and blown out of the water. This YouTuber comes up, blows us out of the water, but they could put out any random video and they'll consistently have maybe 300K videos or views, right? Whatever story number out there. But it's because they're consistent at like their low point is always gonna be that high consistency. That's like, well, the consistency is better in so many ways versus this one viral episode and then you get like 5 views or from there out, you know? Yeah. So that's also like a marketing thing I was told, like, even if you get featured by like, I used to like app marketing. If Apple features you, great, but after 3 days, that feature goes away and you have no traction, no money, your business dies. But if you do marketing organically outside of that, you have a business. And if you get featured, that's just nice to have. Right, right. For sure. Okay, so to bring it back to being like, talking about like being subjective when it comes to like quality and content, right? You have your own hardcore band and you've interviewed a lot of folks in the space. What to you makes a good hardcore song? Oh, wow. That's a great question, actually. It needs to be to the point, and that can be taken in a number of different ways. I think as I've grown older, my attention span for like good hardcore songs has lessened. But I do think that certain songs that do take me on a journey, I've talked about this on the podcast multiple times, but there's a band from Toronto called Real World, and they put out an EP. The intro track's like, you know, your normal 59-second, minute long kind of, you know, spooky little ambient thing and maybe some guitar feedback. But the first track after that is pushing on 6 minutes. And my first listen, I didn't see the length, but the song just kept going, and I was like always anticipating like what's gonna happen next. And so I think maybe not to the point. I'm gonna retract that and say a good hardcore song keeps people on their toes. So for me, I think that there's gonna for sure be things that are tried and true, you know, transitioning from the fast part to the two-step and having a breakdown lead in this way, that's all been done for years. Mm-hmm. I do think that bands who can do that but throw a spin or something that's a little bit different, like here's the breakdown but the drums are, you know, have a hi-hat beat on it. And again, that goes again back to what we were talking about earlier as far as like, you know, high risk equals high reward potentially. Mm-hmm. Someone could be like, well, this is the wackiest shit I've ever heard and this sucks, versus like, this is the most innovative thing I've ever heard in heavy music. Mm-hmm. So for me, I think that there is, again, looking at like where the gaps are. If you don't see maybe like, there's not like, there's a lot of bands doing like features, but nobody doing features like this, whether it's like this sounds very cheesy, but growing up, I always nerded out when Good Charlotte had the guest guitar solo from Sinister Gates of Avenged Sevenfold.
Oh, interested.
On that one song. So I was like, for years, I've always thought like bands will have other people come on and like sing something. And I think that's like almost standard now, I think, for every hardcore band.
Yeah.
But if it was like, hey, like, on this song, like maybe we'll never do it live, but on this song, this person rips a wicked guitar solo, or like this drummer like takes over, or they do like a back and forth kind of thing. I think that there's more bonus points, I think, for bands who do try to figure those things out in a live setting. So, you know, like I know Ian from Regional Justice Center did a collab with Justice from Trapped Under Ice, where like Ian's traditionally would do a lot of the writing for RJC, but on those two songs it was like I'm doing all the writing and playing the drums and the guitars and all that, but like it's just Justice on the vocals. So again, that's like not a lot of people do that, but as soon as like someone does it and it works, then it's like it goes so far beyond that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a good hardcore song, like hardcore as an umbrella term of like punk, metalcore, death metal, whatever, is like keeps people on their toes. Yeah. No, that's a great question, honestly.
I was thinking like you have all these playlists, right, that you put out. You did the Scopies, and it's like, okay, there's got to be like, obviously it's subjective, right? But like, how do you kind of analyze songs, right? Especially because you're just a creative person outside of music. It's like, oh, he probably overanalyzes all these little parts and appreciates the little things that no one's ever gonna notice after like 100 listens, you know?
Yeah,
for sure. So what made you do the Scopies in the first place, to actually just leapfrog into that one?
It's so funny because like I think it was like maybe out of jealousy of everybody like doing their like, you know, this is my 2020 recap of my favorites of 2020. And I was trying to find a way that I could do that with Scoped, and you know, just the timing of things, I was like, I didn't really have anything prepared to do it in like a very big elaborate way. But again, like not trying to hold the idea at this like, oh, it needs to be a perfect, like there's no, if I held this idea like it needs to be this big elaborate thing because it's like a 2020 recap thing, I probably wouldn't have done it. But I literally was like, fuck it, I want to do it. I like put a chair like right here, set up my camera, set up my audio, I already had like my picks already lined up. It was just like, how do I talk about this? So I was like, okay, I have everything. Hit record. We listened to the music, and I posted it like literally the next day. And what was weird is like, I literally expected that to just kind of be like a whatever, like kind of filler podcast. But when we were doing our 100 episode recap, it was the number 5 most engaged with episode, combining the audio listens and the video plays.
Okay.
So my hypothesis was maybe more of a clickbaitable video. Not like clickbait is an ugly word, but like people are looking for like people's best of 2020 that grabs your attention right away, right? You're like, oh, there's like some curation and some like the best, right? I also think I don't know if this is correct or not, but I was recording the Spotify listens off my laptop, and naturally like the video got like not flagged, but just like copyright claimed immediately, because you got everything from Code Orange to Spirit Box to whoever. I think the video got blocked in certain countries, but they're like way out in the middle of nowhere, and we don't have a giant audience there. So I'm sorry if anyone from like Istanbul wasn't able to watch that podcast video, but again, that was just a matter of like, like again, going back to what we were talking about, like doing something for yourself, but also doing something for other people. That was, I think, a combination of both. It was like, I know people are going to be looking for like, what does Spencer think about, like the last year of releases, especially during this time. But it was also like a selfish thing. Like I wanted to plug certain EPs and albums that I had fucked with heavily for the last year. So yeah.
So it's like, if like you pulled up in like your Spotify like songs, is it all just hardcore? Like, do you have like Death on there, or Exodus, or
You're trying to expose me?
Well, always like curious, right, to like see what people can do, because obviously like I had that thing where I grew up, like when I started into metal, it was like Slipknot, System of a Down, but like no one I listened like was friends with liked metal past that, right? If they did, it was like Avenged Sevenfold or the Guitar Hero songs. Yeah. But then when I got like met metal friends and hardcore friends, that's all they listened to. And I was like, oh, I wonder if people listen to anything outside of that,
Yeah. I definitely think heavy music as a whole is what I listen to every day. I wouldn't say it's the only, like I only listen to like, loud music. Like I definitely like a lot of lo-fi, like hip hop kind of stuff. As like, for me, I think music has, like me listening to music is like, there's certain like, how do I want to word this? There's certain reasons that I'm listening to certain genres. So like with heavy music, a lot of it right now, at least, is like, I'm listening to this band because I'm thinking about putting them on a playlist, or like maybe I'm going to reach out to them because I think that they're absolutely sick and want to have them on the podcast. Maybe that they're like so cool of a band that I want to like build a relationship with them, and then maybe get them to come out to, Calgary or Western Canada in general to play shows. So I think that there's a level of that. But when I listen to something like a lo-fi hip hop radio station, that might just be like, I'm hanging out of the house with my wife, we're making supper, and I just want something to kind of fill the room that doesn't have like because I like lo-fi a lot, because like there normally isn't like a singing track. It can kind of just be instrumentation, and maybe like there might be like a hook that's a sample of something, but it's like, mixed in and repeats a couple of times, but it's more of like an easy listening thing. Like I definitely have like those acoustic songs that I'll like listen to and just start crying immediately or whatever. But I would say like what I'm listening to, if someone found me on the street and I had my headphones in, it's probably going to be like a breakdown or like something heavy. Like,
No, for sure, that makes sense. Okay. So I'm gonna hard left it a little bit. Kind of bring it back to like the scope exposure thing in general. So obviously, like I feel like I knew scope exposure is like being like a podcast, right? And then I found the other channel with all the live shows, right? It's like, how come you have them separate? Why not just have like one scope exposure channel on YouTube?
Yeah, I think that was an idea going into it, and I think a lot of sometimes something that I've done at least is like sometimes when I'm not sure about how to do something creatively, I just look to other people that are doing something very similar, and at least, like, I'm not saying outright copy, but like at least look at what they're doing and taking that as like somewhat of a directional input. So I think like there was a lot of channels that I watched on YouTube where they had like a main channel, and then when they started their podcast, either, you know, during, you know, like you were saying, lots of people have started podcasts during COVID, but even if they started it years before this, they had it separate. And again, looking at like, okay, well, why would they do that? And I was like, well, the content is really different. Like on the main channel, it's like, here's a, you know, like I watch a lot of H3. I don't know if you know who that is. Yeah. So like a lot of their videos on the main channel would be like them commenting on something ridiculous. And it's maybe a, you know, 15-minute video, you know, there'd be like little collabs here and there. But then all the podcast stuff is like pushing into the 2 to 3 hour mark for different things. So I thought of it the same way. Like if someone is going on the main scope channel to look for a set of like any band from Western Canada here, or like I'll even just say the Wild Rose hardcore sets, because like we film that like pretty much every year. If they're going to that and then there's like this interview with some guy that they don't know, like I'm almost thinking about it from their angle, like that isn't a good experience for them. Like it's confusing to like, oh, like someone told me to check this out, but then they get there and they're lost in a sense. So for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to just like separate it. And really like the main channel really hasn't had anything new on it since May of 2020. We had like yeah. And like, cause we had sets and like drum cams and different things that, you know, we had in the hopper. And then, you know, obviously if there's a bucket and then like stuff is pouring out and you're not refilling the bucket, it's just going to run dry. Yeah. So once we ran dry, it was like I'm still thinking about like, is there content that I can make that's maybe outside of the realm of like, this is a live set of a band that we filmed. Maybe it's more like, I don't know, me reacting to like different hardcore sets that I find online and trying to like, again, pull that. It's like, it's related to us, but like a new strain of content. But the podcast was just so like, I want to build this. It was almost like a little daunting because I was essentially building that from like a new YouTube channel from zero. And I think a lot of people, when they're doing creative stuff and they change it up, that's scary to be like, well, I built up all this stuff and I don't want to start over. But it's like, it's almost like fun to like restart in a way. Like we've all played video games where like, you know, we beat the game, so to speak, and then we're restarting. But it's like, in that sense, I was restarting with all the knowledge that I had learned when I was like first starting Scoped, as far as like making thumbnails, tags, like and there was lots that I've learned in that last 100 episodes that I did. So, you know, even if I was starting a brand new like Scoped channel that like had something content wise totally different, I would rather have like certain buckets versus like trying to pollute one specific channel and making that a nightmare for people who are looking for content that I've made, if that makes sense. Yeah.
No, I feel it. And I think that comes back to like the same thing, like talking about like Instagram consistency, right? Like there's some channels that blend it all together and they're fine with that. And there are some people that don't, but when you go to that one, you know immediately what you're getting, what it is, and like if you like it or not. And so I'm like, I run the same battle of like, do I blend it? Do I not? What's the right answer? Is there a right answer? Oh my God.
Yeah. Like I think the user experience applies to so many different moments in life that we don't think about. Like I think about sometimes I'll go to like a grocery store that I like, maybe they're not in the same like area of my city, but it's like I have to run an errand and then my wife's off work in 30 minutes. And so I'll like pick up dinner there. And like in my mind, this normal grocery chain that I go to that's closer to my house is laid out this way, but then I walk inside and I'm like, where the fuck is like the eggs and the cheese and like the chips, and they're all spread out in different areas. So it's almost like then I have to spend 5 to 10 minutes just to like find these things, and then maybe they don't carry a certain brand. So it's like that alone is like a user experience where someone could be hooked for life if they have like, if it's just flawless for them. And like obviously no grocery chain is going to have the exact same layout because they're buying different buildings, but the analogy there is to show like a lot of people think about the content, but they don't think about how they're giving that to someone and how that person feels when they discover that. Like, does it give all the context? Is it giving too much information? So I'm always thinking about that. Like, how is someone finding something that I make for the first time, and how do they feel about when they see it?
For sure. No, that's cool, man. I get it. But yeah, I like how you said, like, from the user experience part, like even like that marketing mindset that we talked in the beginning, like is already still always at the top of your mind.
Yeah,
for sure. Cool, man. Well, I know I've taken a lot of your time. Can I ask?
No, you're good.
Can I ask one more question? Is that
absolutely? Yeah,
for sure. So you've done everything from clay figures to semi-truck videos to this podcast, right? After kind of doing all this, what's something you've learned now that you've completed your 100 episodes that you kind of wish you probably knew, not episode 0, like maybe episode 25, that would probably saved you a lot of headache and a lot of hours, like editing or filming or interviewing or outreach? Just
what is something that I've learned that I wish that I knew at episode 25? That like, I'm not gonna see every single benefit that every episode brings. So what I mean by that is like, a lot of people think that they put something out, they'll get like a couple likes on it, and they think that's it. And I think something that I've learned through the process is like, I literally was talking to someone just yesterday about like, I put out their episode. It was like, I wanted to interview this person, but I don't care about the engagement. I don't care about the numbers for this one. That episode sparked all these conversations apparently with this person that I wasn't privy to. And that's super cool to be like, there's stuff like, to actually know firsthand that I'm doing something, and I'm not gonna like, and nor should I be seeing all the details and things that happen. Like, I put out an interview with a band, and then so-and-so like checks out that band, really likes them, they have like a little one-on-one. Obviously I'm not going to see that, but knowing that that is happening is really, really fulfilling to me. And it's also like and it's not like this has been something that I've learned about as far as like the numbers go, but like I've always thought about like the numbers really, like, they do matter in a sense. If you were an influencer and you're trying to prove your reach to like a brand and you're trying to work out a deal, like that obviously makes sense. But sometimes the numbers, if you had like 100 views on a video, like, and then you look at someone who's been doing YouTube for forever and they have millions of views, you're like, well, that's nothing. But still, those 100 people, 3 of those might be some of the biggest like decision makers in the space that you're trying to do, right? Like, like always thinking about, like, don't think about 100 as like this nucleus thing. Like, think of like, there could be 100 people and one of those people could be the thing that takes you to that next level.
Yeah.
So, just as an example, like I put out an episode with my friend Anaya from Dare out of California. And that episode alone got the lead singer of Had Heart to not only follow the account, but also like shout it. Like he took a screenshot, posted it on his like Instagram, and was like, "Hey, this is a podcast that you should be checking out right now." And like that is, I'm always thinking of like the cosigns that people are giving. So it's like, that is the ultimate cosign. Like, it's not like a story share that's going to expire in 24 hours. Like, it's on the feed until if he would decide to delete it. But like, again, what would be the point of him doing that, right? If he's like so confident in like co-signing that with his influence. So that is still something that like reminds me of like, it doesn't, for me, it literally doesn't matter probably forever how many views or listens a podcast is getting. It's like, are people listening? Because some of those people could be the people to introduce me to the next big guest, introduce me to the next, brand that wants to sponsor, introduce me to the person that maybe has a space that we build a relationship and then we're recording out of. So it's all about like, I watched like a clip of Larry King. It's all about just like showing up every day. Like you show, like, cause if you don't, people are going to move on to like a number of other people who are showing up every day to produce content, or just be there for people. Cause at the end of it, like people are, going back to what I was saying about feeling ultimately indebted to like hardcore being such a huge part of my life that I want to give back and do these episodes, because especially right now with no shows, like if I wasn't as, entrepreneurial and just crazy as far as like making my own stuff, I would, and still being that way, I'm still listening to other podcasts where people are talking with certain members of bands, like always, like I'm craving that like social like fellowship and learning from people. So if I'm not going to hear it while their band is playing at a fest that I'm at, I still want to do that in some way in my life. So I forgot what the original question is, but as far as like what have I learned is like the numbers, like for the first couple of years that you're doing something, like really don't matter. It's just about showing up and making shit that you like. Yeah,
that's cool, man. That's hella cool.
Yeah.
For sure. Damn, Spence, I appreciate your patience and just like going through all these questions for hours. Like I said, usually I say 23 minutes, but I just couldn't help myself and just keep asking.
Oh no, I'm more than happy to share. And like I definitely wanted to do more podcasts outside of like, me interviewing people. So yeah, this was really, really fun.
Cool, man. Well, I appreciate it. Where can people follow you at? Where can people follow Scoped Exposure and listen to more, watch more?
Yeah. So Scoped Exposure films, bands, all around the world. We're based in Western Canada. You can find us on YouTube if you just search Scoped Exposure. We also have a podcast where we have a video and an audio version. So that's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you consume that. We're on Instagram, Scoped Exposure. Don't really do much Twitter stuff because I don't like that platform personally.
Yeah.
But you can follow us there. We're on Facebook. Literally, if you just search Scoped Exposure, you'll find us. My handle on Instagram is Spicy Spence with an underscore. I'm trying to get the handle without the underscore because that's a dead account and no one, the guy who owns it doesn't do anything with it. But maybe they'll come around one day. But yeah, if you search Scoped Exposure, you'll find some stuff. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This was really fun.
Yeah, no, of course. I appreciate it. All right, man. I will give you back your time and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much again.
Yeah. See you, Spencer. Bye.